This is the Mop Up. I'm David Feldman. Sorry to keep you waiting. All it takes is one Republican defector on the Senate Judiciary Committee, and Todd Blanche's nomination for permanent Attorney General dies before it even reaches the floor for a full vote. Texas Senator John Cornyn, who was primaried out of office earlier this year by Donald Trump, Cornyn is one of those possible Republican defectors. He's now saying he's going to be a no until he can get it in writing that the Justice Department has canceled any and all plans to set up a $1.8 billion weaponization fund to reimburse anyone claiming to have been victimized by the Biden Justice Department. With the House of Representatives on a 5-week summer recess and the Senate trying to clear out, it's now almost certain Donald Trump will not get the SAVE Act passed before the midterms, meaning mail-in ballots and proof of citizenship will not suppress the Democratic vote. Polling looks bad, especially for control of the House of Representatives. Donald Trump is desperate, and he's driving Senate Majority Leader John Thune insane, demanding Thune get rid of the filibuster so that the SAVE Act could pass with a simple majority. But Thune keeps telling him, I don't have the votes. I don't have a simple majority. And Speaker Mike Johnson also reportedly telling Trump the votes just aren't there for the SAVE Act in the Republican-controlled House, which is beginning to look like it's not going to be Republican-controlled. Thank you for your comments and complaints. Rickets is a vitamin D deficiency, not a vitamin C deficiency. I stand corrected. And 67 votes to impeach a president. I think. I got about 5 people telling me that, and I think it's. I said you needed 70. According to my listeners, about 5 of them who I trust, you need 67 votes in the Senate to convict a president during an impeachment trial. Got that both wrong. Ricketts is the incumbent senator from Nebraska, Republican, and I had said, isn't that a vitamin C deficiency? Many of you said, no, it's a vitamin D deficiency. And I said you needed 70 votes to convict a president during an impeachment trial, and it's 67. Also, many of you complained after I said on the last show that the odious governor of Michigan, Democrat Gretchen Whitmer, cannot be trusted. It's something I've been saying for about 2 years, and something I said on the last show, because the odious Gretchen Whitmer went ahead and endorsed the equally odious Congresswoman Haley Stevens for the Democratic nomination for Michigan Senate instead of my hero, Dr. Abdul El Sayed. So, a lot of you got upset. Why are you trashing the governor of Michigan? David Sirota over at the Lever, or the Lever, Lever. I'm a subscriber. You should all read David Sirota. He used to be a speechwriter for Bernie Sanders. He now runs the Lever or Lever, Lever. It's great. If you love The Intercept, you'll love the Lever, Lever, or Lever. Anyway, he wrote yesterday that Whitmer, a Democrat, opposes Medicare for all. And why? Right? Well, I'll get to that in a second. Haley Stevens, Congresswoman Haley Stevens, who Whitmer just endorsed over Dr. El Sayed, Haley Stevens also opposes Medicare for all, but she's a Democrat. Sirota, writing over at the Lever, or the Lever, writes that Dr. El Sayed literally wrote the book on Medicare for all. He's a doctor, and he's written extensively on how Medicare for all can be implemented and, as Bernie always says, will be way cheaper than the health insurance system we now have in place. But David Sirota, the great David Sirota, writes that the odious Gretchen Whitmer, governor of Michigan, likes the system currently in place. Why? Because, and I didn't know that until I read David Sirota yesterday, because it's incredibly profitable for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, which Governor Gretchen Whitmer's odious father was the longtime CEO of and earned at least $20 million from that company upon his retirement. The great David Sirota writes that Blue Cross Blue Shield last year denied 1 out of every 6 medical claims made by Michigan residents who had purchased their insurance through Obamacare. David Sirota goes on to write that through bundling, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan has been one of the largest contributors to Gretchen Whitmer's gubernatorial campaigns. That is one of the reasons Gretchen Whitmer, the Democratic governor of Michigan, who I would vote for if I had no other choice, but that is why she's scum and can't be trusted. You're against Medicare for all? You're scum, especially if you're in the Democratic Party, especially if your father got a $20 million payout as longtime CEO of Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. You're a healthcare executive, you're scum, especially if you're in the Democratic Party. Get out. Get out of this party. Go be a Republican. So, again, if I had to, I would vote for Gretchen Whitmer. If I had to, I would vote for the scum that is Haley Stevens, who is scum compared to Dr. Abdul El Sayed, a doctor campaigning on Medicare for all. Haley Stevens, and it's a week from Tuesday, the August 4th Michigan primary, she has taken, we believe, $30 million from AIPAC heading into the August 4th Michigan primary, where she has now taken a slight lead over Dr. El Sayed in the recent polls. AIPAC does not lobby for the nation of Israel. If it did, it would have to register as a foreign lobbyist. So it is not, AIPAC does not lobby for Israel. It does not lobby for Zionists. It does not lobby for Jews. It lobbies for the Likud party, which Benjamin Netanyahu is the leader of. AIPAC is Benjamin Netanyahu's lobbyists. That's it. Meanwhile, the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs reporting that between January 1st of 2025 and June 31st of 2026, Israeli settlers in the West Bank launched 3,033 attacks on Palestinian residents. On Sunday, Israeli settlers in the West Bank destroyed 2 mosques. In 2025, Israeli settlers in the West Bank reportedly destroyed and or vandalized 45 mosques in the West Bank. The West Bank, which now has close to 750,000 Jewish settlers, in direct defiance of the Oslo Accords, the UN, and America's official foreign policy. And every time the UN passes a resolution condemning the settlements in the West Bank, it is AIPAC who lobbies the UN and American lawmakers to make sure that resolution isn't passed. That is AIPAC, which is spending at least $30 million in the August 4th primary to get Congresswoman Haley Stevens the nomination for Senate as opposed to Dr. Abdul El Sayed, who is running. He's a one-issue candidate, basically. Medicare for all. He also wants to cut off the $3 billion in funding we give each year to Israel. And you know who else supports that? Benjamin Netanyahu. I went over that on the last show. Benjamin Netanyahu repeatedly has said throughout 2026, it's time for Israel to stop taking what he calls welfare from the United States. He said, we don't need it. At least 221 people on board. I'm sorry, got ahead of myself. The Washington Post reporting that cocaine trafficking into the United States has increased since war criminal Pete Hegseth and war criminal Donald Trump launched their illegal Operation Southern Spear, targeting alleged narco-terrorists on boats traversing the Caribbean and Eastern Pacific. No proof. They offer no proof that they're narco-terrorists. So far, at least 221 people on board those boats have been executed without a trial or an opportunity to surrender, which is in direct defiance not just of the 1948 Geneva Accords, but the United States War Crimes Act of 1996. We should be putting Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump and Marco Rubio on trial here in the United States because every single one of those 221 people they killed, claiming they were narco-terrorists, those are war crimes. By every standard, those are war crimes. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met separately with war criminal Donald Trump on Tuesday before they attended South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham's funeral inside the Capitol Rotunda. Trump, before the services, remembered Lindsey Graham as someone who was, quote, into war. That's what Donald Trump said. During an interview Tuesday morning on Fox News, Trump said, quote, I mean, Lindsey liked war. To be honest with you, okay? I said to him, you're a nice guy. How come you like war so much? He was a guy that liked war, said our president. And then he went on to say, I jokingly say this, but there's nothing funny about it. Lindsey's never seen a war he didn't like. He was very much into that. And then Trump said, and for good reasons, he felt that way. Lindsey Graham, who wanted to send your sons and daughters, your fathers and mothers, your nieces and nephews, your friends, ground troops. Lindsey Graham wanted to send ground troops to seize Karg Island in the Persian Gulf. Trump's deteriorating support from his base flows primarily from a campaign promise in 2024 to end America's forever wars. But he then returned to the Oval Office and got us into one. Right now, he has no idea how to end. This looks like it's going to last longer than forever. It was Benjamin Netanyahu, by all accounts, who talked Trump into the February 28th joint Israeli-American bombing campaign that has been an abysmal failure, with the Strait of Hormuz completely shut, meaning 20% of the world's oil and nearly 30% of the world's fertilizer is unable to leave the Persian Gulf. As Iran attempts to collect tolls for passage through Hormuz, ships that attempt to avoid those tolls by straddling the sea lanes along the coast of Oman, well, they're fired on by the Iranian Navy that Trump and Hegseth still insist is at the bottom of the sea. That's a pretty good Navy if they can blow up ships situated at the bottom of the sea. Take a look at this map. That is the Strait of Hormuz. On one side is Iran, that's to the north, and to the south is Oman. There are reportedly talks between these two nations, Oman and Iran, on how to patrol both shipping lanes. And despite it being against international law, to collect tolls from ships jointly. Some tankers passing through Hormuz are already paying tolls to Iran, which is why Trump's naval blockade, which ended during the ceasefire, resumed on July 14th. Okay? This is how you keep a war going for 20 years, like we did in Afghanistan. Nobody, including me, can keep track of all this. The blockade is on, the blockade is off, there are peace talks, there are no peace talks, oil prices are up, oil prices are down. This is how people just forget it. It's the summer, I don't want to pay attention. Next thing you wake up, you're 20 years older, and the war in Iran is still going on. And that's Trump's plan. Oil prices, which came down during the ceasefire, are once again touching $100 a barrel. We have massive news about to break this week. And there are two ways to follow this. One is the story itself, and then how it's covered by the media and the reaction. Okay, second quarter earnings, those are profits, are going to be reported by Chevron, Shell, Exxon, and British Petroleum this week. Between now and next week, we're going to get earnings reports from Chevron, Shell, Exxon, and British Petroleum. This is one of the most important stories. And let's see how it's covered. So a year is divided into quarters. So every 3 months, publicly traded corporations must report their profits. The war started on February 28th. The first quarter started on January 1st. It ended on March 31st. That means first quarter earnings for the oil companies only reflected about 1/3 of the war. First quarter starts on January 1st. War starts on February 28th. The last month of the first quarter, they got to benefit from the war. So, even though it was just 1 month, we saw earnings close to doubling over the previous quarters. But we didn't see record profits because only 1/3 of the first quarter included the war in Iran. The second quarter, which is what? April 1st through July 1st? Yeah, April 1st through July 1st. That's the second quarter. That's all war. That is 3 months of the oil companies getting to profit off war. Okay, two minor players so far have reported. Sinclair Oil, not a big player. They beat Wall Street expectations with revenue up 53% year over year. 53% for a minor player. Halliburton, Dick Cheney's company, is a player in many things, including oil, fracking, but other things. Their earnings jumped 14% in the second quarter, but they're not a big oil company. Halliburton, a lot of their profits come from fighting wars for oil. So they get awarded no-bid contracts in order to overcharge the Pentagon for food and laundry services while building contaminated water pipelines that sicken our soldiers when they're taking showers in Afghanistan and Iraq. So we are waiting on the big players, the real players. Shell, ConocoPhillips, British Petroleum, Chevron, Exxon, okay? Shell reports on Thursday. Exxon and Chevron report on Friday. British Petroleum reports on Tuesday. Pay attention, not just to that story, these earning reports, but how they're reported and what the reaction is. This should be the number one story dominating the weekend, because we will have heard by Friday from Shell, Exxon, and Chevron. And Chevron is expected to report a 227% year-over-year increase in profits for the second quarter. That's what they predict, meaning they're probably going to beat that. Exxon is expected to report only a 136% year-over-year increase in profits. And British Petroleum is expected to report a 107% year-over-year increase in profits. So profits have at least doubled. Profits, not revenue, earnings. Doubled. More than doubled. Shell, we're not certain about. There's been a major disruption to their liquid natural gas production because of the war. So they may not report mammoth earnings like their competitors will. So while why incredible, probably record profits that we're going to be hearing about at the end of the week and the start of next week. Why? Why do you think? Why do you think? Well, the cost of oil has gone up. So the oil companies get to charge more. And I'm just saying that the Wall Street Journal, is reporting that this came in right before I started. Look at these numbers. Let me just, okay. All right. Wow. Okay. ExxonMobil, Chevron, ConocoPhillips, and Occidental Petroleum are now expected to report at least $31 billion in profits for the second quarter. So if you add up all the profits just for the second quarter, Exxon, Chevron, ConocoPhillips, and Occidental Petroleum are expected to book at the very least $31 billion in profits for the second quarter. I'm looking at the Wall Street Journal right now. Maybe I'm reading this wrong, but I'm triple checking. $31 billion for the second quarter in profits compared to $12 billion for the second quarter last year. I'm triple checking because it looks like they've almost tripled their profits. They've gone from $12 billion to $31 billion for the second quarter. I keep looking at this. Sometimes I read something and I get it wrong, even though I'm looking at it. That's just in from the Wall Street Journal. So how do they get away with this? How do the oil companies get away with it? Well, you got to have a monopoly. That's the first thing. If you're a baker, for example, and you sell a cupcake for $1, a quarter of that is the cost of the flour. And if the cost of flour doubles, that means you need to charge $1.25 in order to offset the rising cost of flour without increasing your profits. But as long as you're raising prices, you bump it up to $1.35, right? To pay for that flour, you need to spend an extra 25 cents, but you figure it's only fair to raise it by 35 cents, take an extra 10 cents in profit. Because customers know the price of flour has doubled. That's the big story. They don't know you're gouging them with that extra 10 cents. So it's costing you 25 cents more on that $1 cupcake for the flour. So you raise the price by 25 cents to cover that. And then because you're a business, you sneak in an extra 10 cents. If the baker was an oil company, the cupcake that once sold for $1 would now sell at the very least for $2 because the baker would say the cost of flour has doubled. But flour is only a part of the cupcake. The same way the price of a barrel of oil is only a part of the price for a gallon of gas. Doesn't matter. Oil companies are doubling the price of a gallon of gas, and if you're the baker, you double the price of a cupcake. That is what is called price gouging, and you can price gouge when you're a monopoly. So long as all the cupcake bakers do the same thing, that price gouging is what they call price fixing, which is against the law. So long as no baker undercuts this consortium of bakers, they can all double the price of a cupcake and almost double their profits. That's how it works. And because Americans are addicted to cupcakes, and we're powerless to break up the cupcake cartel because we are all financial illiterates incapable of asking our politicians the right questions. So we continue to buy and eat these cupcakes instead of thinking, you know what? I should probably have a slice of fruit instead. And trust me on this, if it were cupcakes and not oil, Donald Trump would be telling all of us that oranges and bananas are the #1 cause of cancer. If he were getting his donations from the cupcake cartel instead of the oil cartel, he would tell you fresh fruit kills whales and causes cancer. OPEC is a monopoly. So America, we're not allowed to be members. Yet we are the largest producers of oil and gas. We are. That being said, all the OPEC nations combined are bigger than we are, which means they get to set the price of oil. And how do they set the price of oil? By controlling how much or how little they produce. Pretty good, right? Thanks to Barack Obama, our domestic oil can now be sold on the world market. Didn't used to be that way. It used to be domestic oil produced in the United States could only be sold domestically to guarantee energy independence. We still hear the term energy independence. It's a lie. It's a lie. The people who say drill, baby, drill, like Sarah Palin, when she was John McCain's running mate, she was going, drill, baby, drill. We got to drill. We got to drill. Why? So we're not dependent on foreign oil. Well, when she was running, we weren't allowed to sell our oil on the world market. But then Barack Obama became president, and fracking by then had gotten so efficient, the oil companies had drilled their way into much too much domestic supply, facing not enough domestic demand. In other words, they came to Obama and the Democrats and the Republicans and said, here's a bag full of cash. Don't throw out this bag. Tom Homan's going to need it. Here's a bag of cash. And if you want more of that, I got to warn you, if we can't sell our oil on the world market, we're going to have to charge like $1 a gallon. And we're not going to be profitable. And if we're not profitable, we can't control what goes on in Washington, D.C., and you people might start funding alternative energy, which Obama did. But he funded alternative energy, but he also bailed out the oil companies by signing into law a measure that allows domestic producers of oil to sell on the world stage. And what does that mean? It means you are probably watching a rerun of The Nanny right now. That's what it means. Nobody wants to hear this. But this is why we're effed, because you'd rather watch a rerun of The Nanny than learn this. What happened is American oil got pegged to the international market, not the domestic market. That means Americans had to pay for oil, and that price was determined by OPEC. OPEC sets the cost of oil because they are big enough, they're a monopoly, they get to determine how much supply there's going to be. Drill, baby, drill no longer means energy independence, even though Donald Trump, his energy secretary, his interior secretary, Wright and Burgum, they'll go up on Capitol Hill and all the Republicans will agree and repeat the lie that we have to open up more federal land for drilling because that's how we achieve energy independence. No, energy independence is solar and wind. Oil prices are set by OPEC. Doesn't matter how much you drill, baby, drill. OPEC will set the price because they're big enough to set the supply. Now, Obama, who could have vetoed this legislation, didn't, and our oil is sold on the international market. That means the more we produce, the more we drill, baby, drill, the more we flood the market pretending we want to bring down the price of oil, which we don't. If we flood the market, that means the less OPEC producers have to produce. See? They'll just, if we keep drill, baby, drilling, OPEC says, good, less work we have to do. We can charge more for less. That's how it works. And they continue to book not record profits every quarter, but if all you care about is money and not creating cancer and heart disease and asthma and destroying the planet, it's a good investment to own stock in the oil companies. You know, if you don't mind killing people and having our soldiers die for this stuff, and civilians, always more civilians than soldiers. So do you for 1 second think anybody in the Republican Party, anybody in the Trump administration honestly thinks the war in Iran is a failure? Follow the earnings reports this week for the oil companies and, of course, the weapons manufacturers. How can we get oil prices down? I mean, Trump keeps saying We got to keep oil prices down. We don't. We don't bring the price of oil down. He's not going to do that. We, the Democrats, some, although Chuck Schumer takes money from the fossil fuel industry, this is when you get off oil. Not incrementally, because climate change isn't incremental. Some say we've already reached the tipping point, so what the hell? Go for, just use oil, because unless you have gills, we're all going to drown. Instead of tackling climate change, Donald Trump is paying, with your money, is paying energy companies hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. They cut one check for $1 billion to the French company, energy giant, Total. They paid Total about $1 billion to turn off its wind projects, offshore wind projects, as well as several other companies, energy companies that were switching to wind, which Donald Trump says causes cancer, according to Donald Trump. Maybe his wind is carcinogenic. I'm pretty sure being in an elevator with Donald Trump and his wind, I'm sure that is carcinogenic. But wind does not cause cancer, and it's not killing whales. But he was put into office by Elon Musk, Charlie Kirk, Tucker Carlson, and the oil companies. Again, OPEC could lower prices by turning up the spigot, creating more supply to meet demand, but there are several problems. There are about 3 problems with that. First of all, they don't want to. They like to fine-tune the supply so they can book profits. They need more profits right now. They need extra money because they need to buy more weapons from American arms manufacturers and Ukraine. Ukraine has turned into a military-industrial complex powerhouse. So they need, the Persian Gulf states need more oil money to purchase weapons. And of course, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff are getting more and more expensive. So part of what's baked into the price of oil is what Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff charge for access. Lindsey Graham said that. Lindsey Graham, in this new documentary, said Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff should not be negotiating with the Iranians. They have conflicted business interests, meaning they lose money if there's peace. Or what Jared and Witkoff want is a $300 billion reparations fund for Iran that they get to skim off the top of. Now, that's just a fact. That's just a fact. So that's one of the primary reasons they're not increasing production and bringing down the price of oil. The other reason is they can't increase production. A lot of the manufacturing capacity for OPEC's Persian Gulf members, it's been destroyed by the Iranians. I think like Qatar's liquid natural gas capacity, 40%. Qatar's one of the largest producers of natural gas, and Iranian missiles knocked out 40% of their liquid natural gas capacity. It's going to take a decade to rebuild. That's natural gas. So a lot of the oil and natural gas just can't be turned back on yet. And a lot of the oil they have already produced, it's stuck in the Persian Gulf, can't get through Hormuz. Now, there is, for these oil-rich Persian Gulf states, a very expensive and way more inefficient alternative to getting oil from the Persian Gulf out through the Strait of Hormuz. There is a way to get the oil out, and this is what they're doing. And it's a bonanza. People are making a fortune because they got to get the oil out of the Persian Gulf. War is always a golden opportunity, manifold ways. Pipelines. If you put your oil through a pipeline, you don't need the Strait of Hormuz. Little problem with pipelines. They cost a fortune to build, and they're never worth building unless oil stays at or above $100 a barrel. If you can keep oil at $100 a barrel or more, then you can get people to finance an oil pipeline. Pipelines are just okay. They don't compare to what are essentially engineering miracles, oil tankers. Oil tankers are miracles, and pipelines can't compete with the flexibility and lower upfront costs that tankers bring to the game. Why is that? Why? Because oil markets fluctuate, meaning one quarter, a country in the Pacific might have greater demand than Europe, but then the next quarter it flips, right? And then suddenly Europe has a greater demand than that country in the Pacific, and you need flexibility. Tankers can change course. Slowly, but they can change course. Pipelines cannot. And they take years to build. They require treaties, environmental impact studies. You have to avoid terrorists, which means you have to hire private contractors to patrol every square inch of a pipeline above and below the ground. And they require, as I just said, massive upfront costs. This is a bonanza for everybody. Bankers, lenders, Eric Prince, whatever he's calling Blackwater these days, arms manufacturers, people who make pipelines, construction companies. This is good. This is good for business. Pipelines are not unnecessary. You need pipelines. They're like trucks or railway transport. They move oil through landlocked countries. But when it comes to the hemispheric moving of massive oil tonnage, it is the tanker, and really only the tanker, that can perform that scale of heavy lifting, getting oil to ports all over the world, where that oil is then delivered by trucks, railway, short-distance pipelines, or even smaller tankers, barges. That's the way it works. What we are beginning to see is oil-rich Persian Gulf nations adapting to the reality that, thanks to this illegal war with Iran, Hormuz may never open. Never! And a lot of people have a financial incentive for it to never open. Think of all the beneficiaries of Hormuz never opening. Oil prices stay above $100 a barrel, and you spend that money on what? Pipelines. A lot of money in pipelines. Pipelines. Huge profits for companies like Halliburton, which services the contractors who build those pipelines. Now, believe it or not, our government, our global economy, the richest 1% thrive off instability. They claim they want stability. Profits are made when markets, especially oil, are completely unpredictable, when prices fluctuate. That is how capitalism works. They disrupt things because if things are stable, then, people can depend on a steady flow of income, and there's no opportunity for massive profit. Silicon Valley, you get angel investors if you can prove that you're a disruptor. If you, break things first and then ask for forgiveness afterwards. It's easier to ask for forgiveness after than it is to ask for permission before. They've outlawed self-driving cars in some states. It doesn't stop Elon Musk or Google from putting self-driving cars on the road because they want to be disruptors. And it's easier to ask for forgiveness than it is permission. Instability. That's what Netanyahu wants in the Middle East. That's why he bombed Iran. He wants Iran to be Syria and Lebanon. He doesn't want stability. Trump doesn't want stability. He doesn't want a stable White House where all his employees are happy and can't wait to show up to work. He wants everybody fighting amongst each other. That's human nature if you're inadequate, if you're an inadequate human being. And capitalism, Schumpeter calls it creative destruction. You have to destroy things. If you're a capitalist and you look around and say, boy, this is a great company. People are working, raising their families, they're healthy. The first instinct, if you're a capitalist, is how do I destroy this? Because if I can destroy it, I can rebuild it. And there's way more money in rebuilding than there is in sustaining something. That's what Las Vegas discovered. The mafia discovered there's no money in owning a casino. The money is in building casinos, knocking down old ones and building them. That's how the mafia stayed in Las Vegas. They don't own the casinos anymore. They own the construction firms. They own the unions that provide to the casinos. They own the restaurants inside the casinos. There's no money in building something nice and making everybody happy. They want to move money around. That's how money is made. And you keep moving the money and you skim off the top. Right now, Hormuz is being closed, and it is creating a massive opportunity for anyone in the business of building pipelines and all the ancillary businesses associated with the building of a pipeline, like providing armed security, housing, equipment, all the way down to drugs and women. That's the way it works. Building pipelines isn't just dirty because you're putting something into dirt. It's dirty because it creates an underground economy. Pipelines are the mother's milk for gangsters, warlords, lobbyists, contractors, all the shady lawyers and accountants living in Virginia and Maryland, suburbs of Washington, D.C., all these executives who suck off the teat of Washington, D.C., while electing politicians who insist government is the root of all problems. These Persian Gulf states right now are ramping up construction of pipelines that, instead of tankers, will transport their dirty, planet-killing, cancer-causing oil west in order to avoid the Strait of Hormuz. Let me show you. Do I have a map? It's kind of hard to understand if you don't have a map. Do I have a map? By the way, you're listening to The Mop-Up. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Okay, so just here we go. There's Iran. There is, what do we have here? There is what do we have? That is the Bab el-Mandab Strait. That is the Suez Canal, and that is the Strait of Hormuz, but that's not what I wanted to show you. All right, I can't find it. F me. F me. I thought I had it. Hang on. It's always good to look at maps. I could look at maps all day, and I still don't know where I am on this show. You would think somebody who loves maps so much would know where he's heading. Here we go. Okay. All right. This is what's going on. If you look at a map, there's Saudi Arabia, and this is the pipeline plan. To avoid the Strait of Hormuz, they're building pipelines, or more pipelines, to travel across Saudi Arabia, away from Hormuz, towards the Red Sea, which would then, that oil would be loaded onto tankers that can travel north and through the Suez Canal or south and attempt to brave the Bab el-Mandab Strait, which straddles Yemen, where Houthis have recently announced a blockade of Saudi ships. Those are their choices. Now, I have an arrow pointing north. Let me explain that. This map is no good. No good. Bad, David. Very bad. Okay. Let's go to the Bab el-Mandab Strait one more time. There's the Bab el-Mandab Strait. So that they're going to put oil into pipelines. They already have pipelines, but they're building more pipelines to take oil from the Persian Gulf, ship it west across Saudi Arabia. Then it gets loaded onto tankers in ports along the Red Sea. And you have two choices if you're Saudi Arabia and your tankers. You can either have it pass through the Bab el-Mandab Strait or the Suez Canal. In order to go through the Suez Canal, Saudi tankers don't have to deal with the Houthis, which are in Yemen. But in order to deliver oil to Asia and parts of Africa, those tankers must pass through the Bab el-Mandab Strait. And in the past 2 weeks, the Houthis have hit 3 Saudi oil tankers after announcing their blockade of Saudi shipping through the Bab el-Mandab Strait. See the lower arrow? That is Yemen, and between Yemen and Djibouti is the Bab el-Mandab Strait. Meaning if the Saudis want to get their oil out of the Red Sea, they can only sail that oil north through the Suez Canal. Yemen, problematic if you're on the side of Saudi Arabia and the oil companies, because Yemen is pretty much run by Houthis who are backed by Iran. One of the very first things Trump did after returning to the Oval Office, you might recall, was bomb the Houthis to stop them from firing on ships in the Red Sea and into Israel. But despite that bombing campaign, despite killing hundreds of innocent civilians, especially Somalis, in a refugee camp in Yemen, despite Trump declaring victory and moving on, the Houthis continue to attack Saudi ships and fire into Israel, because you don't solve this problem by bombing. And you don't solve it with ground troops. You solve it by diplomacy, which means you make it in everybody's best financial interests for that oil to flow through the Strait of Hormuz and the Bab el-Mandab Strait. That's how you do it. You spread the wealth, which people in charge, that's anathema to them. The idea of spreading the wealth. Why can't we just bomb them into submission? No, the way this works is you call it diplomacy and then give them money. This is what we're looking at. A massive opportunity. Pipelines in the Persian Gulf. And as I tried to show you with this map, but I got ahead of myself, they are also, let's see if I can do this. Okay, there's the Red Sea. Okay, I'm screwing up, but you know what? It's fun to look at maps. Okay, so that's the Red Sea. And what they want to do now, instead of going through the Strait of Hormuz, they're building pipelines that head north that will pass through Iraq and into Turkey, where Turkish ports could then load tankers to deliver oil to Europe. That is what's being done right now. You see all those oil-rich countries like the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Iraq. They can't get their oil through the Strait of Hormuz, and they're thinking, well, why should we send oil through the Saudi pipeline to the Red Sea? Why don't we just send it up north to Turkey? They want our oil. It's expensive, and that's good for the oil companies, as well as all the people who profit from building, maintaining, and protecting pipelines. Okay? Now look at this. Look at that arrow pointing up. Those are pipelines that have to go from the Persian Gulf to Turkey. They pass through all of Iraq, especially northern Iraq, where, of course, the Kurdish fighters are. And they have their own oil, but they don't have their own country. Iraq, Turkey, and looking at the map, you can see Iran all have a problem with the Kurds, which means any pipeline going from the Persian Gulf through Kurdish-held territory in Iraq and or Turkey, well, that's great news. Great news if you profit off ongoing low-level military skirmishes. You know, like Eric Prince, who's flying drones over Haiti right now. If you profit off wild fluctuations in the price of oil. If you profit off repairing and or protecting oil pipelines, it's a bonanza. It's a bonanza. Pipelines, again, not as efficient as tankers in terms of getting oil to the market. But efficiency, as I just told you, isn't where the profits are. If oil is loaded onto a tanker, which delivers the oil, that's efficient. But the only people making money are the people who own, transport, and insure oil. Think about your job, especially if you have a job in corporate America. Do they want efficiency or layer upon layer of inefficiency so everybody can skim? Pipelines share the wealth because they're inefficient. They keep the price of oil up, which means you can make larger profits with less oil. One of the chief reasons we went into Afghanistan back in 2001, well, it wasn't because they attacked us on 9/11, because they didn't. One of the chief reasons we went into Afghanistan is Bush and Cheney were Texas oil men, and it has always been their dream to build a 1,000-mile pipeline that went from Turkmenistan through Afghanistan into Pakistan, which could then load that oil onto tankers down around, where would that be? The Gulf of Oman or the Arabian Sea? Where is that? I don't know. But Karachi, right? Get that oil from Afghanistan to Pakistan and then on a tanker. And Unocal, before it was taken over by our friends over at Chevron, good people from Chevron, Unocal invested several $billion before 9/11 to build, yes, it's the Arabian Sea. The Unocal, before it was taken over by Chevron, invested several $1 billion trying to build a pipeline which never came to fruition. They wanted to build a 1,000-mile pipeline through Afghanistan before 9/11. It never came to fruition because we couldn't end the fighting among all the warlords in Afghanistan. So the Taliban didn't attack us on 9/11. It had nothing to do with 9/11. 99% of Americans think they did because George Bush and Dick Cheney are war criminals and liars. What they wanted, partially, one of the reasons we went in was trying to get this 1,000-mile pipeline built for Unocal, which got bought by Chevron. But we couldn't get the warlords to guarantee the safety of that 1,000-mile pipeline if it got built in and through Afghanistan. The Taliban wasn't really interested. They thought there were more important things than oil money, like oppressing women. So, meanwhile, let's turn to Ukraine, because it's all related. Kind of like J.D. Vance's birth family. All related. Mother, father, all related. Let's look at a map, if I can find it, of Ukraine. Do we have one? Sure we do. Okay. Ukraine has taken credit for sinking an Iranian ship in the Caspian Sea that was transporting components to build and repair drones and ballistic missiles. To give you an idea of how badly the war is going in Iran for Donald Trump and the United States, this Iranian ship that Ukraine took out in the Caspian It was carrying supplies from Iran to Russia. Iran, despite fighting a war with America, still somehow is capable of supplying Russia with drone and missile parts. All intelligence reports say, despite our hitting 20,000 targets in Iran since February 28th, Israel and the United States have barely made a dent in Iran's ballistic missile and drone capability. They can still launch them, and they can still manufacture these weapons of war, which is why Zelensky had a fire on an Iranian ship in the Caspian Sea heading to Russia, because Iran is supplying Russia with armaments. Doesn't sound like we're putting a dent into Iran's missile and drone capability. It is worth noting and pointing out that Ukraine has a 40,000-mile network of oil and natural gas pipelines. Before the Russian invasion of 2022, this entire network of oil and gas pipelines was filled primarily with Russian oil and natural gas. In January 2025, Ukraine stopped allowing Russian gas to flow through those pipes, but landlocked European nations, especially Hungary and Slovakia, depend on Russian oil. So Ukraine, while fighting a war with Russia, is still allowing Russian oil to pass through its pipelines and into Hungary and Slovakia, which pays Russia for that oil. And Russia uses a lot of that money to fund the war against Ukraine, which is home to all those oil pipelines Russia depends on to fund its war against Ukraine. Well, needless to say, but I will say it anyway, well, I'll repeat what David Swanson said. All wars are a lie. That's the name of his book, David Swanson. All wars are a lie. I've had him on this show, and all wars are a lie. And if Americans could read a map, which even you see how good I am at reading maps. I can't even find my maps. If we understood where our energy and food comes from, which we don't, if we understood who profits from the decision to go to war, well, we're not allowed to understand that. They will not let us, or at least they don't make it easy for us to find out who profits from these decisions to go to war. They don't want us to know, because if we could follow the profits, the incentives, if we could follow and understand the budgetary process in Washington, D.C., then every day here in the United States would be January 6th. Every day would be January 6th if Americans could read a map, understand who profits from war, and understand the transfer of wealth from our nation's treasury into the bank accounts of lobbyists, former generals, shady accountants, mobsters, mercenaries. Every day would be January 6th. And it's kind of why Trump was allowed to return to the Oval Office in 2025. For many Americans, Trump was reelected not despite, but because of January 6th. Because in the back of some people's minds, they don't understand any of this because we're not taught any of this. They don't want us to understand any of this. So when we're not falling prey to conspiracy theories, we know in the back of our head we're paying a major price for all of this garbage. We lack the vocabulary to articulate specifically how we're being exploited and oppressed and financially paralyzed. But in the back of our mind, we know nobody's protecting us from any of this, Democrat or Republican. We know at worst, all of Congress, both parties, are in on it. At best, you can say about the Democratic Party's leadership, they're not protecting us from it, that they're kind of toothless. That's the best you can say about the Democrats, that they're failing to protect us. Now, I am a Democrat, and I want to clean house, and I will vote for any Democrat to destroy the Republican Party. I will vote for Joe Manchin. I will vote for Josh Gottheimer. I will vote for Haley Stevens. If she beats Dr. El Sayed on August 4th, I will tell you, vote for Haley Stevens for Senate, even though she opposes Medicare for all and took $30 million from AIPAC, which cares more about preventing Medicare for all than ending the $3 billion a year we give to Israel. Because Netanyahu doesn't want that money. He said so repeatedly throughout the year. It's a wedge issue, Israel. AIPAC uses it as a wedge issue to prevent things like Medicare for all. It is the definition of a wedge issue. So people say, well, why do you beat up on the Democrats? Because they're my party, and I want to clean it out. And we had the same fight in 2000. And even though the left lost, we won. And the Democratic Party won. It's good to fight in your party. Civil wars in the party are good. It's why Republicans keep winning, because they're at each other's throats. And you look back at the reason Joe Biden won is because of Bernie. It's because there was fighting, the base got animated. On the left, the centrists got animated, and then Joe Biden domestically was the most successful progressive president since Lyndon Johnson, according to Bernie, since Roosevelt. Domestic policy. What probably destroyed Harris was Biden's foreign policy. Bad foreign policy. You vote for Democrats, they're better on domestic, way better on domestic issues. Foreign policy, not so much. And let me review for you. Jen Psaki, who has her own show on, what is it now, MS Now? Anthony Blinken, or as I call him, Stinkin' Blinken, Biden's Secretary of State. Jake Sullivan, Biden's national security advisor. Okay, I'm talking about foreign policy here. They were and still are in on it. Blinken, before becoming Joe Biden's Secretary of State, after he left the Obama White House, he founded a company called West Exec. And why did he brand it West Exec? Because it was run by people who worked and will work again inside the West wing of the White House, which is the executive branch. So West Exec, West Wing, Exec, executive branch, give us money and we'll give you access to the West Wing. Pay us to advise you because we're West Exec. We're former Obama and Clinton officials who held posts inside the West Wing, and we can help you secure all types of contracts from the State Department to the Pentagon. And by the way, it's not just the United States Capitol that has a lobby for lobbyists to hand out money. The White House also is lobbied, which is why visitors' logs to the White House are so heavily redacted. Jake Sullivan worked for Clinton when she was Secretary of State. Remember Libya? Then he worked in the Obama White House. And because Hillary did such a great job with Libya, Joe Biden had no choice other than to make Jake Sullivan our national security advisor. And when Jake Sullivan is not going through the revolving door, he works with former British spies who have set up some type of global financing firm. Wow, you want to know how to spend your money? Check with some former British spies, like the Steele document, which was mostly accurate, by the way. Early on in the Biden administration, The Intercept, which is fantastic, it's like the lever or the lever, L-E-V-E-R, you should read The Intercept. They did all the reporting on the nearly 16 West Exec lobbyists who began to populate the Biden White House. Not just Jake Sullivan or Jen Psaki or stinkin' Blinken. There were 16 other West Exec lobbyists populating the Biden White House, holding on to top positions inside the State Department, National Security, U.S. aid, and the Justice Department, and the Pentagon. Not only that, Joe Biden, who I love, and I do think he's maybe the best president of my lifetime, but not when it comes to foreign policy. Not when it comes to foreign policy. Had he been able to run again, I have no doubt his second term would have been incredibly progressive on domestic policy, but not foreign policy. Not foreign policy. I'm not going to curse, but Joe Biden spent every Thanksgiving that he was president, every Thanksgiving was spent vacationing in this turd's Nantucket home. Turd, David Rubenstein, is a turd, is an effing turd. He is the founder of the Carlisle Group, which some say is the single largest investor in the military-industrial complex. He funds Ken Burns' documentaries. David Rubenstein, turd, funds the PBS. And this turd, David Rubenstein, because he has so much blood money from the Carlisle Group, has bought himself his own television show on the PBS. So, you know when they cut funding for the PBS and they say, well, David Rubenstein is the best argument for getting rid of the PBS because of all the people qualified to have a television show on the PBS. David Rubenstein, turd, is the least charismatic, the least qualified to have his own television show on the PBS. Wait, it gets worse. Many of my listeners from 6 years ago remember that my enemy was the turd David Rubenstein. I used to tell people boycott the Mark Twain Prize because this turd, David Rubenstein, ran the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts, which hands out the Mark Twain Prize. That is why the turd, Bill Maher, took a Mark Twain Prize from the turd, Donald Trump. Donald Trump runs the Mark Twain Prize because he runs the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. They had to take his name off of it. But the Mark Twain Award was awarded to Bill Maher because of Donald Trump. Congratulations, Bill Maher. Donald Trump thinks you're the funniest man in America. You're not even funnier than Donald Trump. So, yeah, it wasn't Trump. It was this turd, David Rubenstein, who defiled the Kennedy Center. He just didn't slap his name on the front of it. Yes, I would vote for Joe Biden again. Yes, because I think when it comes to domestic policy, he remains the most progressive president since Johnson, possibly FDR, not my words, Bernie's words, and Bernie's words are sacred. And I would vote for Harris. I would vote for Hillary and Bill Clinton. Oh, I would vote for Obama. I would vote for again and again because when it comes to domestic policy, yes, none of them are Bernie. None of them are Elizabeth Warren. None of them are AOC or Cori Bush. But they do make it so the left can speak up without having to worry about getting shot in the streets or rounded up. So, yeah, I will vote for Gretchen Whitmer and Haley Stevens. But it should be Cori Bush in St. Louis. That's another primary that we're following where our friends over at AIPAC, once again, are targeting another Democrat of color because she wants Medicare for all. This is the woman, Cori Bush, who slept on the Capitol steps in order to remind Nancy Pelosi, who's worth a couple $100 million, that the eviction moratorium was about to expire in 2021. That's why AIPAC is going after Cori Bush again. AIPAC use Israel as a wedge issue. They're worried about Medicare for all. They're worried about eviction moratoriums. AIPAC is worried about having to pay taxes. Israel, protecting the $3 billion that America gives Israel, AIPAC doesn't care about that because AIPAC represents Benjamin Netanyahu, who has repeatedly said throughout this year, the time has come for Israel to stop taking money from the United States. He calls it welfare, and he says, I'm opposed to welfare, as is AIPAC. They think AIPAC thinks welfare is a dirty word. So they're trying to kill Medicare for all. In Michigan, by going after Dr. El Sayed. They go after Jamal. Show me a black progressive candidate like Jamal Bowman, Summer Lee, Cori Bush, or Abdul El Sayed, the doctor in Michigan. Show me a person of color or a Muslim, and I'll show you AIPAC trying to undermine their race inside the Democratic Party. No other lobbying group comes close to waging war on left-of-center candidates in the Democratic Party than AIPAC. That's what AIPAC does. They fight left-of-center Democratic candidates. There's not in the primaries, not the oil companies, nobody comes close to AIPAC. And that makes them monsters because we can't. One of the reasons my party will not endorse Medicare for All is AIPAC. And Gretchen Whitmer's father ran Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan. It's not just AIPAC. Not just AIPAC. Where was I? So, yeah, I mean, I would vote for Harris and Biden again. But their foreign policy, well, an argument could be made, and a pretty good one, that Harris lost because of Joe Biden's foreign policy. Democrats, Trump said of the odious Lindsey Graham, he never met a war he didn't like. Democrats, a lot of war crimes. Yeah. A lot of war crimes. There's a lot of lip service we hear regarding peace, but Nancy Pelosi became Speaker of the House in 2007. Now, she voted against the war authorization for the war in Iraq. Very prescient. 2002, Nancy Pelosi, I believe she was the whip in the House for the Democrats. And she said, I don't trust Bush. I don't trust the intelligence. It's too early. I'm not giving him the war authorization for the illegal invasion of Iraq. And she was critical of the illegal invasion of Iraq because Saddam Hussein did not attack us on 9/11. Did not attack us on 9/11, and he didn't have weapons of mass destruction. Highly critical of the war. But when Nancy Pelosi became Speaker of the House in 2007, on January 3rd, 2007, all she had to do to stop the war in Iraq, all she ever had to do was not put a war supplemental on George W. Bush's desk for him to sign. I'm a broken record on this. You don't need a war powers resolution. And the war powers resolutions are not going to hold up before the Supreme Court. So stop with the war powers resolutions. Congress, the Speaker of the House, or the Majority Leader of the Senate, either one can end a war by refusing to pay for it. Either one can stop. It's that simple. But they don't want us to talk about that because it puts the onus on the legislative branch. And they don't want this responsibility. But it is very simple to stop a war. Funding bills only come out of Congress. Presidents are powerless when it comes to funding the government. The only power a president has is vetoing a funding bill. That's it. But if a funding bill never gets put in front of him, he has no money. No money, no war. No money, no war. No money, no war. Problem is, for Democrats, no war, no money. Virginia, Maryland, those are blue states. Those are blue. They always go, at least for president and Senate, always go for the Democrats. Maryland, Baltimore, that's where the war profiteers live and work because they're sucking off the Washington, D.C. teat. Meanwhile, our bombing campaign over Iran remains sporadic because the United States and its allies in the region are running low on munitions. Buy stock in the arms manufacturers. And those munitions will take 2 to 3 years to replenish. So look, we fought a war against Afghanistan for more than 20 years. How many trillions spent? How many lives lost? And it created massive wealth in Maryland and Virginia, like I said. And while massive sums were transferred from our U.S. Treasury into the bank accounts of contractors, lobbyists, lawyers, accountants, Americans who were paying for all this, while we're going without health care to pay for it, we were living and are living in a country with crumbling schools and infrastructure, while that war siphoned off hundreds of billions of dollars each year and killed thousands of soldiers. While all that was going on, what happened? Be honest. I'll tell you what happened to me. I lost interest. I lost interest in that war. That's what happened. We all stopped paying attention. And if you're one of the war profiteers who live in Maryland or Virginia, when we stop paying attention, that's good for business. Yeah, we just, we knew what the parties told us. We knew what the media reported. And we lost interest. And the more we lost interest, the less the news media reported it. Because there's no money in reporting on a war that nobody's interested in. And if you're Donald Trump, you want the American people tired of hearing about your war. That's what you want. Most Americans said, including Barack Obama, we're fighting Afghanistan because they attacked us on 9/11. They didn't. Afghanistan and the Taliban had nothing to do with 9/11. Nothing. And that should be the question asked of every politician running for office. Very simple question. Did the Taliban attack us on 9/11? Now, when I had more Democratic candidates on the show in previous elections, I would ask them that. And I had to stop asking it because they didn't know how to answer, and I want Democrats to get elected. I'm biased, so I've stopped having candidates on because I'm going to ask them, did the Taliban attack us on 9/11? Ask Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson if they attacked us on 9/11. Colin Powell's chief of staff during that war. Ask Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson if the Taliban attacked us on 9/11. Trump's plan, Washington's plan, is to keep telling us Iran is desperate to make a deal on some days. And then on other days, there are peace talks. Some days there's going to be bombing. And that cadence of war and then peace will continue way past the midterms. Trump will keep this war going until we lose interest and after we lose interest, which is already happening. And once most Americans lose interest in the war, the media loses interest. And then you can keep this war going 20 years, just like Afghanistan, which lasted longer. Our involvement in Afghanistan lasted longer than our involvement, get ready for this, lasted longer than our involvement in World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam combined. Why? It's boring. That's why. You stop paying attention. Listen to me. We invaded Afghanistan in 2001 because George Bush, who is a liar, lied, as war criminals do, and told us they attacked the World Trade Center and the Pentagon on 9/11. They didn't. Get that through your thick skull, America. The Taliban had nothing to do with 9/11. Afghanistan had, just like Saddam Hussein in Iraq, had absolutely nothing to do with 9/11, and yet we continued to fight a war in Afghanistan, where our involvement lasted longer than World War I, World War II, Korea, and Vietnam combined. You know, one day, and I know this, one day somebody's going to look up because we're bored. I know this. One day, and Trump will no longer be president. One day, he will no longer be president. And someone will be saying, do you realize the war in Iran has lasted longer than our involvement in World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and Afghanistan combined? That's where we're heading. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. If you enjoyed any part of this show, please hit the like button so it'll remain in your feed. Please share it. Thank you to Bob and Mila in the chat room. Let me show you. I did some... Hang on, this is good. Somebody's been playing with After Effects and AI. So, yeah, leave a comment. If I got anything wrong, leave a comment. I issue corrections. I issued 2 corrections on today's show. Thank you for reminding me. And go to my website. I have a fantastic website. I really do. Go to davidfeldmanshow.com. If you want to read all the prep that went into today's show, go to davidfeldmanshow.com. and hit show prep. And it's all the articles that are sitting on my desk or will be sitting on my desk that go into the preparation of today's program. It's refreshed every 15 minutes, so it could be the stuff that's sitting on my desk right after this show. What else? If you would like to read the notes that I'm working off of right now, hit the Big Dig. The Big Dig is those are my show notes. This is pretty good. That's a little After Effects, a little AI. Hang on, I got one more. This is good. And then I'm wrapping it up. Okay. What else? No, just check out my website. I built a website by myself. And you can, if you go there, you'll see, oh, wow, he really did build that by himself, I can tell. No show next Sunday. I am going to take the weekend off. So join my fan club for updates. I am the permanent president pro tem of the David Feldman Show fan club. That's it. I'll see you all Thursday at 6:05 p.m. What else do I have here? All right, last one. Then goodbye.